Today, I'll be talking about the rising rates of homelessness through different periods of history. I'll discuss different events through these different periods. Some of the periods I'll be talking about is between 1930 and 1980. I'll talk about an event that happened between 1980 and 2015. And finally, I'll talk about an event that happened between 2016 and present day. The first event I'll discuss is the Great Depression. I'll go over a brief summary of this as many of us already know what this is, and I'll discuss some of the misconceptions that people have about the Great Depression. After that, I'll begin discussing how this affected homelessness and made the rates of homelessness rise during this period. So, the Great Depression was just a period of human suffering as many people experienced hardships that they've never experienced before. Some of these hardships was people losing their jobs, being evicted from their homes and ending up on the streets, experiencing hunger, and just an overall depression in the cities across the country. One of the misconceptions people have, though, is that the stock market is the sole reason for the Great Depression, but this is just not the case. The stock market did accelerate the global economic collapse, but it was not the sole reason for the Great Depression. Some of the reasons included the collapse of the world trade due to the Smoot-Hawley tariff, government policies, bank failures and panics, and the collapse of the money supply all contributed to the Great Depression. So once the economy crumbled, many people started to become homeless. Homeowners and renters could no longer make their payments due to being unemployed and became homeless. These homeless people had to find shelter. Many moved in with relatives, moved into vacant buildings, and even for some, try to find shelter under bridges. It wasn't until people started building makeshift houses together and created Hoovervilles. Hoovervilles were very crammed and poor living conditions, but people had to resort to something. Here I have some photos from the University of Washington that are going to be my primary sources. Starting in the top left is Seattle's main Hooverville. This was one of the largest and longest lasting documented Hoovervilles in the country. It stood for 10 years from 1931 to 1941. It covered 9 acres of public land and it housed a population of 1,200 people. The picture on the bottom left is a homeless man lying in a makeshift bed in Seattle's Hooverville on October 27, 1931. This photo was taken by photographer Lee James P. The photo at the right and all the information for it comes from the Library of Congress. This photo is known as Migrant Mother and was taken by Dorothea Lange in 1936 on a migrant farm in Nipomo, California. According to Dorothea, she approached the lady and could tell that she was a desperate mother who was hungry, so she was drawn to her. She said that she didn't say much other than that she was 32 and that her and her family had been living off of frozen vegetables from the surrounding fields and birds that her children had killed. She also said that she sold the tires from her car to buy food, and there she sat with her children huddled around her, and she took the photo. She said that she felt like the photo may help her, and she knew that it could help her too. Eventually, this photo would become one of the most iconic photos in history. Okay, I'm going to move on to the Great Recession. Now, I'll give a brief summary on what this is, and then I'll go over how it affected homelessness rates. So, the Great Recession was definitely one of the worst periods we've seen financially since the Great Depression. It caused the subprime mortgage crisis, which pretty much was banks were selling loans to investors who the investors thought, hey, I'm going to buy this loan, get a house, and then I'll sell it and make profit off it. But the banks were also selling loans to people who couldn't pay off these loans, and they knew they couldn't pay them off. So when these people couldn't pay off the loans, the housing market started to crash, and it caused a loss of business. Consumer confidence went down low, and the housing market completely crashed in 2008. And a lot of places had to go bankrupt. For example, the Lehman Brothers were a huge corporation, and they had to go bankrupt because of this. So, with the housing market being crashed, there was definitely a rise in homelessness. One study is the 2009 annual homeless report to Congress, and pretty much they found out that family homelessness across the 3 years from 2007 to 2009, there was an increase in homeless families. It went from 131,000 families in 2007 to 170,000 100,000 families in 2009. And the time period of 2007, 2009, that directly correlates with the recession. And then another study through the Pew Research Center, they found out that multi-generational homes increased by 10.5% between 2007 and 2009. And this also correlates to the recession because people were losing their houses and they didn't have anywhere to go. And rather than living on the streets and becoming homeless, they moved in with their families. So multi-generational housing hit the largest bump ever between 2007 and 2009. And for the others, unfortunately, it caused a huge rise in homelessness because of the Great Recession. I'm sure most of us are familiar with the COVID outbreak, but I will discuss what it is. COVID is an infectious disease caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and it has infected 631 million people and it has caused 6.59 million deaths worldwide. So this virus is a pretty big deal, and with a big deal, there's going to be new rules. So businesses started to imply new rules throughout the company. Even some businesses had to completely close down, which would cause layoffs. And of course, this is going to increase the unemployment rates and cause a bunch of problems. It also caused problems with the supply chain disruptions, and it put in place fiscal policies, which would then contribute to inflation, which is what we are seeing now and continuing to see. With inflation, it has caused many problems. So I want to discuss some of these problems and give a clearer understanding with some graphs. Both of these graphs are from the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I'll start with the one on the left. It's the civilian unemployment rate. And I'll start at the very left at 2002. As you can see, we're moving to the right, and it starts to raise once we get to 2008, and that's due to the Great Recession. We're going to keep on moving. We see it, this fades, and in 2020, it hits a peak, and it is a huge peak in unemployment rate, but it has faded by 2022. Moving on to the next graph, we have inflation rates on lots of things. You can see in the all items, food at home, energy, electricity, shelter, gas, vehicles. It's got a lot of things, and yeah, I'll discuss this graph. We can see in 2002, we'll start over here. We're moving, and we start to peak somewhere in 2008, and then it just drops, and that's also due to the Great Recession. And we keep moving to the right, things start to go back normal, and then we're hitting 2020, and as we're moving to 2021, 2022, we hit a peak. It starts to rise, and we peak in 2022, and that directly relates to the supply chain issues that we experienced and the fiscal policy causing inflation. And yeah, this is still going on today, and it's leading to a lot of problems, and I'll discuss some of these problems, but mostly focus on homelessness. So for this slide, I'll discuss how COVID and inflation affected homelessness. We have a graph to our right from the National Alliance to End Homelessness organization, and it's a homelessness data collection from 2007 to 2020 on homelessness. Unfortunately, it doesn't go up to 2022 due to COVID preventing them from getting their data. But it should give us a clear understanding on what is happening and how homelessness is rising. So we'll focus on this dark line towards the top that's kind of dark blue, blackish. The other ones get more specific. You can look at those if you want, but I'll be discussing the top one. So we see overall homelessness is very high 2008, or 2007, 2008, 2009. We see it starts to fade down around 2012. And as we're getting to 2019, we see it's on the rise again. And in 2020, it's starting to really go up. Unfortunately, this graph doesn't go further than that, but we can tell that it's on the rise since 2020. Something that might give a clear understanding on how it's a rise too is my local news channel, ABC6 Wait News. They done a point in time study or account report on the city, and they found that 1,178 people are experiencing homelessness in Knoxville, Tennessee. And that total marks a 50% increase from their last year's study. So Homelessness in Knoxville is going up, and I'm sure it's going up in more cities due to these problems. That wraps up my presentation. Hopefully, I gave you a clear understanding on just why homelessness rates start to rise through these different major events through different time periods. Thanks.